Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Conversations with Agapè. Today, I am joined by Tara and Dan, who will share their story and what they call holy chaos, sharing their story about parenting biological and adoptive children. Tara and Dan, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing this incredible testimony. I, of course, will turn off my video and we'll pop back in towards the end. But I want you guys to take it away. But again, thank you so much for joining us and being here today.
Essentially.
Thanks, Ashley. We're glad to be here. We are definitely going to talk about our holy chaos. As we as we talk about our family, you'll hear all about our beautiful chaos. But to begin, and a disclaimer, we need to say that we are definitely not parenting experts by any means. But it's been quite a joyful ride, I think, to be parents. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of background about us. Deacon Dan and Tara Brooke, we are in Bismarck, North Dakota, and we are the parents of 5 children, 3 biological, 2 adopted children, and then we have done a stint in foster care, and we'll talk through that a little bit as we get going. We got married back in 2005, and we knew that we wanted to have kids someday, but not right away. God probably had different plans for us, because it was only 4 months into our marriage we found out that we were expecting our first child. And I don't know that there was anything that could have prepared us to be parents or prepare us even for the pregnancy that we endured. I should say I endured. Dan stood by my side, and so he also endured that with us. But our first child, Lucy, was born a year and a day following our first anniversary to an emergency C-section. I had some medical issues, and she came out early, ended up having some medical issues that, we just had no idea that's what parents were going to, new time parents, and we're not thinking about medical things, but she had some issues, and we spent a lot of time doctoring with her first few months of life. But the thing that was pretty cool about it is immediately, we didn't know how to be parents, but we became her advocate, and it was just like God was right there ready to help us through whatever we were going to face with Lucy's health. She's very healthy today. She just graduated from high school. She's 18 and embarking on her adult journey of life in her next phase. But we got to be her parent by ourselves, just the 3 of us, for about 3 years. It was a little shy of 3 years when her baby sister came into the world. She was planned, and she was our colicky baby. And so going from one child where you were able to, give all of your attention, all of your energy to the one child, was really hard when you had to bring 2. And she was our colicky one who needed a lot of attention. So that was a difficult transition, but God again provided and helped us. And then in 2011, their brother was born. So a little 2 years later, their brother was born. And those are our 3 biological children. And we thought, we loved, Leo was such a good baby. And we were like, okay, probably because we thought we were done, right? Like that was our impression, is we were done after 3. And we just treasured those moments, and Lucy and Eva had each other to play with. So we weren't always torn for attention and those sorts of things. But Dan's going to talk a little bit about how we had to kind of parent them a little bit differently, not really parent them differently.
Yeah.
But
so, every parent or every set of parents that have had more than one kid probably have learned this, that they're so very different. And it's hard to believe as first-time parents or as second-time parents when your second child comes along and you say, well, we're the same parents. We have the same genetics that we passed on to our first child. We have the same home. We have the same mannerisms. We have so much that's the same. How is this kid so very different? And what we learned as we started on our multi-child parenting is pretty early on to make it really clear to us, to set expectations between ourselves and with our kids, that we love you equally.
Mm-hmm.
We don't necessarily always love you the same. And that's really playing out in 2 different ways. One is that across our 3 biological kids, we have 3 very different love languages. Tara and I are pretty familiar with the 5 love languages with Dr. Gary Chapman. And we have one child who really, really values quality time, and another child who values words of affirmation, and another child who just wants to wrestle all the time. And you can guess which one the boy is. If we were to love our children the same and say, well, equal love means we have to love them the same, we would always be leaving two of them out at least. And so we started saying, well, no, each of our kids needs to be loved the way that they receive love. Another difference is based on their need. I mean, Tara mentioned some medical things. Our first child was in the hospital from 10 days until probably about 20-ish days. I mean, there was a stint there. Another one of our kids, we wound up in Rochester, Minnesota at Mayo Clinic for a surgery when they were 2 years old. Our kids didn't always have the same needs. And we first felt guilty about saying, well, we're having to provide unequally, we're having to provide differently, and really settled in ourselves that, you know what, we love our children equally. That doesn't necessarily mean that we treat them the same all the time. And that really helped us build some coping strategies as we got into adoption and fostering, because in those situations, we found that love languages and ways of receiving love and certainly need were very unequal across our family.
Absolutely. So again, we said we thought we were done, right? So lo and behold, Dan and I are pretty prayerful people, and we are always wanting to be listening to the voice of God and discerning. You know, that's a huge part of, you know, using NFP in your marriage is God calling you to have another child at this point in time. And we really felt like our family wasn't complete, but I was a terrible pregnant person, like seriously the worst. But we were like, okay, well, God's saying we're not done. I guess we can try to achieve pregnancy or whatever. And we did achieve 2 pregnancies following the birth of Leo. But both of those they were within 4 months of each other, and both of those ended up with miscarriages. I have I have endometriosis, I have polycystic ovaries, and it was really difficult on my body to have these pregnancies. And so I was like, okay, Dan, I don't think we're called to have another child ourselves. So what do you think God is asking of us? And that's when we began to pray about it. And we were always because with endometriosis and polycystic ovaries, we'd had the conversation before we got married that if we can't have children, we're open to adoption. And so we began talking about adoption, and we immediately brought our children into the conversation. And so when we began the adoption process, Lucy was 9, Eva was 6, and Leo was 5. And we immediately brought them into the conversation and said, you know, Mom and Dad have been praying, and this is kind of where we're at. And we're thinking that God might be calling us to adopt a child. And they were pretty excited about it. They were, they asked a lot of questions, but they were excited about it. But I went on a silent retreat because we knew we were called to adopt, but we didn't know what kind of child or from where, or if we just adopt one of the children that are in foster care in North Dakota here, or any of those sorts of things. But I went on a silent retreat, and it really confirmed what we were supposed to do. I was reading a letter from Pope Francis at the time, and he had made a comment about children with special needs, and especially called attention to Down syndrome. And I was like, oh God, that makes so much sense. That this is what I did all through college. Is I worked with individuals that had Down syndrome, and I helped them to live an independent life. And so I knew quite a bit about Down syndrome, and was kind of thinking, okay, God, this might be where you're calling us. This might be what you're doing. But I thought it was kind of crazy too. Like, we are not equipped to be special needs parents. Like, we don't have any experience with that. But at the end of the silent retreat, and typically, to be honest with you, like, on a silent retreat, if you've ever been on one, there's no blings and whistles. There's no multimedia stuff. And this priest who was leading my retreat said, I was praying, and God asked me to show a video to you guys. And he goes, I'm not really quite sure why, but God asked me to show a video to you guys. And it was a video of, like those military homecomings. And a dad was coming home, and he was surprising his child who had Down syndrome. And I knew, I was like, oh, okay, God, here I am sitting there as he's showing this video bawling. And I'm like, I hear you, God. Like, this was for me. I get it. So I came home from the silent retreat, visited with Dan. Then we shared it with the children, and everyone was on board beautifully. though we were like, what are we getting ourselves into? Because, Dan had never been around people with Down syndrome, and he didn't necessarily always know exactly, like being a special needs parent is kind of scary. There's a lot of things that go into that. So, but we sat down as a family one night and kind of went through this website. I remember scrolling through the website, and we're all sitting around a computer, and our son's face came up in the scroll, and I just stopped scrolling, and everyone was like, that's him. And our 5-year-old at the time said, Mom, Dad, that's the one. We can love him. We can give him the love he needs. He could be part of our family. And from that moment, we were matched with usually you don't get matched with a child before you begin the process, but we were matched with this child before we even began our home study process. And so anyway, that went, I'm telling you, adoption, though, is really slow, and it's like being pregnant with an elephant, like as an elephant, it's way easier on my body to adopt than it was to birth a child. So, but anyway, that's how George kind of came to be. We went through the process, and then lo and behold, we got the call and we got to go get him. So Dan's going to talk a little bit about that.
I'm not talking about elephants in pregnancy.
Anyway
at all. So it is different when you're adopting from China, especially at that time, obviously. Most adoptions were for infants, most adoptions are for little girls. And so we were adopting a boy who was 2 years old at the time, and he had special needs. So the process was very different. Like Tara mentioned, we were matched ahead of time. Normally you would get your home study done to be approved and then go into a pool and wait, and then you get your call and you don't know who that child is. But our experience was a pre-match, and so we knew who this boy was. And so for us and for our family, a lot of the timers started with that moment that Tara described, that for us, he was a person that, of course, we knew there's a process, and we knew that all had to play out. But in our minds and in our hearts, we expected and hoped and prayed that he would be part of our family, and we were waiting for him. And so in that preparation time, we did work with our children quite a bit to set their expectations and to make sure that we had the best possible transition into adoptive parenting and adoptive siblings, knowing that was not going to be perfect. Tara mentioned some of the strategies that we use, making sure they're part of the process, not surprising them with this or springing it on them or telling them this is what we're going to do. The second was really making sure that they knew that this is a transition that's going to have a big impact on our family that we can't predict fully. We know that there's going to be some things. He doesn't speak our language. We know that he has Down syndrome, and we don't know what level of impact that's having on his various skills. And we certainly didn't know the degree that both that diagnosis and also the neglect that he had in that orphanage were going to have on him when we got him. So making sure that our kids knew that this, to the degree that we could with them at those ages, is a commitment, kind of like marriage. We're doing this. And when we do this, we don't undo this. We'll have this child, and he'll come into our home as one of our children. And just like one of our biological kids, just because there's challenges, just because there's needs, doesn't mean that we can undo this. We will go forward and through no matter what happens. And I think that was helpful for all of us to have a firm foundation to start with. When we actually went to complete the adoption, Tara and I went over to China for 2 weeks. Now, again, our kids were a year older. It was about a 16-month process, right? So, 10, 7, 6 age range. That's a long time for mom and dad to be gone, and not just gone, but 13-hour time difference. So basically opposite times. We would call once or twice a day based on schedules and touch base with them. But 2 weeks of really being gone. That was hard for them. And that's something that as we got older, they were able to unpack. But that was a challenge for our biological kids. When we brought George home, 13-hour flight home, that was a lot for that little guy. And getting at the airport and seeing the family and their friends there, and there was a whole gotcha group there to support us, and a real celebration, which was beautiful, and we appreciate it so very much. Also a lot for George to process. We have pets. That was something that we didn't really think about necessarily. We were probably told at some point during the training for adoption and preparation, but George had never seen dogs before.
Pets.
So, they were actually really scary to him. That was something that we had to kind of work through with George. But even just preparing for this conversation, talking to our biological son, one of the memories he has of that time is that George cried a lot that night.
First night.
And just unpacked a lot of that stimulation.
And didn't sleep. Mom was up with him all night.
Did not sleep much. And that was one thing that we got this advice. We really valued it. And that was cocooning. So Tara and I spent 2 weeks with George in China.
Yeah.
Just the three of us. He got to have these two people who, after that period of time, he'd spent so much time with in the safe space that we were really anchors for him once he came home. And once we came home, we spent another week cocooning as a nuclear family, just our kids, just George, just us. Yep. No visitors, not even extended family. We politely discouraged them from coming by and said, you have plenty of time to meet our new son, your nephew, your grandson, whatever. We really need him to understand who family is and feel safe here. It was strange to start in the middle. And I'll say that again with fostering. With biological children, you get to go through the stages of having a child and they grow with you. And your skills as a parent grow with that child. Yeah. And when you adopt, especially a kid who's 3, when we completed adoption with George, or with fostering, where they can be various ages, you start where they are, whether your skills are ready or not. And that was one of the things with adoption that we didn't expect. And well, there are a lot of things that happened there between, starting over with vaccines and medical care, starting at 3 years old with basic medical necessities and checkups and vaccinations and things. There was quite a bit that kind of just had that jerking moment, but we wound up transitioning into it and through it.
Yeah. So then George, he kind of, after that first week of the cocooning, he really fit into our family. Like, there was not a whole lot of, we were blessed because a lot of times kids have a hard time bonding to their new parents, and we didn't have that experience with George. He just craved love so much that he wanted to be with whoever could love him. And we've had lots of issues, like from his time in the orphanage, the amount of medical appointments, the amount of therapies. He still has food aversion, which we really link back to, like, he doesn't eat solid foods, which is nothing we thought we'd ever have to deal with as parents. So, and he just is trying to come in and say hi. And so it was a couple years, or about 18 months, until we figured out that we really were not done with our family again. And so in end of 2018, I started to feel like, okay, God is calling us to do something here again. And Dan was like, wife, you're crazy. And, but I really said, okay, Dan, I just really want you to pray about this. I really feel like God is calling us to do something again. And Dan started praying about it. And lo and behold, he also had that same, probably not as convincingly as mine, but he was like, okay, I think you might be right. And so we decided that, okay, we're going to adopt another child. And so we began this process of adopting another child from China that had Down syndrome. Edwin, is he's actually a month older than George. So like their birthdays are about a month apart, and he would be about a month older than George. And so when we began this process, it went swimmingly smooth. Like, it was beautiful. It was a process that was like, wow, this has way less hitches than the first process had. We had some delays and things with the first process, but by the end of 2019, we had a letter of approval from China saying that he is our son. And then you have to go through some things with the United States and China together, where you get kind of an Article 5. And that came to us in February of 2020. And if you think back to February of 2020, you may recall what happened in our world, right? COVID kind of shut us down. And so our adoption got actually put a little bit on hold And that was not something we could have ever prepared ourselves or our children for. Like, we should have traveled at the very end of February. Like, we should have probably boarded a plane on February 28th or March 1st. We should have been there by it was his 6th birthday. We should have been there. And we should have had him in our hands, and we should have had him in our arms, but we couldn't prepare for the fact that the entire world was going to shut down. And so, anything else you want to add there about?
Yeah, I mean, just the phase that put us in as a family of kind of a limbo status, a twilight status of.
They could call at any time and say you could come. We couldn't travel. We couldn't we couldn't plan anything large for our family because we didn't want to be in a predicament of not being able to just up and leave whenever we wanted to. Right. And that was hard on the kids. Like,
the emotional connection too.
Yeah.
You know, I mentioned with George that when we found him and when we were matched with him, we considered him to be our child or our brother. And we did the same with Edwin. Yeah. And we had all of the legal documentation that backed that up. I mean, legally
he's our
son.
Yeah.
And to then be told and to explain to our kids that no, he's going to stay over there for a while. We don't know how long. We don't know what this looks like. That was hard. And yeah, we spent.
So 2020, 2021. In 2022, we started thinking, okay, well, should we use this home study for something? Because we had to keep updating our home study, right? You have to keep things updated.
Right. So as long as we had that, I mean, it's one of those things where we wanted to again, we felt like, well, maybe we need, you know, maybe we're called to have, not need, but called to have an expanded family. And there's a real need of fostering. And here we are with a home study in this situation that doesn't seem to be resolving anytime soon. So we investigated that and made very sure that, you know, if we were to foster, it would not have a negative impact on our pending adoption completion. We kind of jumped into into fostering with kind of some knowing that it was temporary,
right? Like, we knew that if we got a call from China, the kids would have to be out of our home immediately, right? So
one of the things that is a real blessing for foster families is a respite idea where the foster family can get respite, and have care provided for their children. Depending on different situations, they can use that. So obviously somebody has to provide that care, and they have to be fully qualified foster family. Not just anyone could provide that respite service. So we started there and had a beautiful sibling pair stay with us for a weekend, and it was a really nice experience.
Yeah.
Now, we quickly found that the real need is in longer term placements. We also quickly found that, you know, despite our intentions, hey, we need to stay flexible. We're going to do respite. That's really where we want to stay. When you get a call saying that there is a 3 and 5-year-old sibling pair that have been removed from a dangerous situation, they just need a place to stay. You can say no, and we have said no to those calls, but you feel your conscience says that you need to have a pretty good reason to do that other than your plans. And so we quickly transitioned into longer term fostering situations. And we're going to talk about.
We're going to quickly just talk about each of the sets, because we actually had a couple sets that stayed with us, or 3 sets, right? And so the first set that we got were 2 brothers. And when we got them, they were sadly addicted to marijuana. So their parents were giving them marijuana gummies. And we had to watch them go through withdrawal, right? These 2 little children go through withdrawal, and nobody prepares you for that as parents, right? So like, oh my goodness, what I mean, neither of us have gone through withdrawal, and we don't necessarily know what this looks like. And so that was an interesting thing. And then they come from a lot of trauma. Like, their parents went to jail. Like, they watched this happen. They watched the police raid their family's house and remove mom and dad, and just so much trauma that they experienced. They had to make phone calls. They got to visit with their mom and dad from the jail. Like, they were on a FaceTime to the jail, which was really an odd circumstance for them, and hard for them to articulate how they were feeling. And as a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old, they don't know how to have these conversations on a webcam, and mom and dad will get frustrated and angry because they were wiggly or they wanted to run around. And so not us, mom and dad, their mom and dad, who wanted them to talk to them and be attentive. But it's hard to explain to a child that mom and dad only have so much time and they want your attention. So, but that was kind of our first. We had them
August through December,
and it was really difficult decision for us to make, but we had to make a decision for our own family because things were happening with George. Actually, one of the kids was not being very kind to George and doing things that we needed to protect him. He was our priority, and so at that point in time, we had to say we need them to move to a different foster family for the safety of our child and for their safety, right? So, but that was kind of our first stint of an extended term, right?
That's where it really started to hit us that foster care is such an important
ministry.
Yeah, that's a great word. Not that everyone sees it as a ministry, but those in the foster care you're providing that, it is a real ministry because those kids are in real need. At the same time, one of the things that was different about that situation for our family is preparing our children and helping them navigate it. And that first set where they're with us from August to December, never do math on a recorded thing like this, for about 5 months. It was hard for our children to share space.
Especially our son, who was like, are these boys replacing me?
It was hard for our children to hear these other kids coming to call us mom and dad because these ones were comfortable doing that. And we had other children who were not. We, of course, were fine with whatever they wanted to call us, they could call us. But our kids hearing that was difficult. And so navigating that with our kids was one thing that kind of was a continuous conversation throughout all of these. We went into this decision with our kids. Of course, we talked to our kids before foster. Of course, we had their opinion on it. And it all sounded like, yes, let's do this while we wait. And then as it kept unfolding, we kept talking and listening and hearing some of this feedback. So it was only after a while that some of it came to light. The second sibling pair were a couple of little girls, one just learning to walk, just learning to do stairs. And that's what I mean by starting in the middle. Here we are with our youngest child, George, who was at that time 8-ish. We had not had baby gates in our house for a long time. And so, just making sure that everything was safe, making sure that we had, outlet plugs and things like that. As foster family, you don't really know who's going to be coming into your house next. And so sometimes those things are a bit of a surprise. Now, unlike our first sibling pair, who were there for 5 months, this sibling pair were only with us for about 3 or 4 days. And fortunately, they were able to go and live with a family member. But unfortunately, it happened very fast. Like our family went off to where they go, work, school, and these children went to their daycare. And during the day, we got a call from their caseworker that a family member was going to take them, and that family member took them from daycare. And for some of our other children, our biological children, it's very hard to not get to say goodbye, to not have that closure. These children are just here and then they're gone. That's something I wish we would have navigated differently if we had the ability to.
And then after they left, we got another sibling pair. At the time that we got them, they were 2 and 4. And they became part of our family pretty quick. And yet we dealt with a lot of crazy things with them as well. Like they were taken out of their home because mom and dad just weren't good. One day they're with mom and dad, the next day they're being taken out because the state is saying that the parents aren't able to take care of them. Well, that was a huge shock for them, knowing mom and dad are still at home and they don't understand why they can't be with mom and dad. But in the time that they were with us, their mom actually passed away. She did some overdosing, and she passed away from things. And so we dealt with. They were then probably, I think they'd had their birthday, so they were 3 and 5. And how do you explain that to? I mean, they hadn't been with mom for a while, and then all of a sudden we have to explain that their mom will not be coming back. And so they actually ended up. We probably are still heartbroken, some of us, but they ended up going with grandma And we actually at that point in time discerned we can't do this anymore. This was heartbreaking for our kids. And as we continued having those conversations, we realized this was not the best for our family at that point in time. And so we had let our foster care license expire because grandma was taking them in. And grandma had them for, I think, all of 3 or 4 days. And then they went to another foster family. And so sadly, you know, we're still in communication with them at times, and they were part of our family. And so that was very, very difficult for several of us to go through. And we went through it together as a family, always talking, always communicating, always, you know, praying for them. We spent a lot of time praying for them. We still pray for them. And so what we're going to have to start wrapping up here. And so we are going to talk a little bit about, did you want to say anything about foster care yet?
No, just a, you know, as we said,
Yep.
it's a beautiful ministry. Our experience and our children in that situation, I'm grateful that we had that opportunity.
Yep.
It did not work long term for our family. I certainly want the message to be that there are many families for whom it does work well, and that's something that I'm glad we explored and encourage others to explore.
One of the reasons why we actually let our license expire too, not that it was just difficult, because it was, but also we were hoping that China was going to call soon. And when you know, we're in 2020, we were in 2023 at that point in time. Things are, you know, the countries are opening back up, things are opening back up. And 2023 came and it went. 2024 came, and in September of 2024, the People's Republic of China sent an email to the families that were waiting, and in the process saying that they were closing intercountry adoption. No explanation of if you are in the process and if we've already promised you this child, you can come get it. Nothing, just we are closing intercountry adoption. So remember, like we said at the beginning, you cannot prepare to be a parent, right? You also cannot prepare for devastating news. These kind of devastating news is you can't prepare your kids that you're parenting already for this kind of news, nor can we as parents prepare for that kind of devastating news. And so September came and we spent a lot of time crying. Our family spent a lot of time healing. And I remember very clearly when the day that it happened, all of us sitting together as a family. And I looked at our children and I said, Edwin is your brother and Edwin is my son. He will always be your brother. He will always be our son. And one day, God will allow us to see him, whether in this world or the next, and he will know, because he's been in contact with us, he will know we are his family. Anything?
No.
I mean, we're still healing. Every day is better. We still are praying for a miracle. To the intercession of a dear friend of mine, Michelle Dupont, hoping for a miracle for her cause. But yeah, we at this point in time, China has been silent, and we are not allowed to go and get our son.
And so our parenting journey so far has very much been a wild ride. After preparing for this, I sent a message to Tara saying we've had quite a ride.
We've had quite a ride.
And I know others have had a more wild ride. But that is our story. And as we take it away, parenting has challenges. It's hard, like marriage. You sign up for the long term. You sign up for whatever comes. And it turns out that even through those low points, through the challenges, you continue carrying forward. And I really attribute that, and our whole family attributes that, as Tara said a couple of times, to God's grace.
Yeah.
We don't do this on our own. We don't try to parent alone, and we don't try to solve all these problems by ourselves.
Another point is you're never going to be able to prepare for everything that parenting is going to throw at you. Just like you can't prepare for everything the second or marriage is going to prepare or send at you, or your job for that matter. You certainly cannot prepare for everything that parenting is going to throw at you. So be okay with that. You don't have to know everything to be a good mom and dad.
Just a handful of tips we saw and that were really valuable to us, in case they're valuable to others, is especially working with adoptive or foster kids who we really don't know their background necessarily, just keeping in mind that, what they need is stability. And they need that stability, first of all, from mom and dad, and of course from the siblings. So that means when they do something that you did not think a child would ever do, because your biological children never did, because they're kind of like you, whether you like that or not, keep your cool.
Keep your cool.
And don't react in a super strong way. We've had some very interesting situations that required us to really just kind of check our emotions and make sure that everyone was safe, and then we address that situation later.
Love doesn't talk about that. This is good.
And they said this during our adoption preparation, but it's one thing to hear, it's another thing to live it out. So here I am telling you, love is so important for these children, but it does not erase trauma, and it does not control behaviors and emotions. So we had a lot of situations, especially with our foster children, where all we wanted to do was make these children feel loved and safe. And they did, I think, in some ways feel loved and safe.
Yep.
But that did not stop them from acting out of their trauma and acting out of the situation that they were in a strange house with strange people, in a situation where they just missed their mom and dad. They acted out of those situations even though we loved on them. And that's okay. That's how it works.
And it wasn't about us, right? Their behavior wasn't about us. It wasn't about anything we did. There's no way we could have understood what they were doing and why they were doing. And there's things that our kids do that we can't presume to know why they've done that. But a lot of times kids are not, especially kids that come from trauma, or even sometimes your own kids, aren't going to give you the benefit of the doubt, right? They're going to think they're right. And so or they're in the right, and so,
or question your motives. They aren't necessarily going to know that they're at your house because you're opening your home to care for them. They might, they might see us as taking them away from their mom.
Yep, absolutely.
That's totally normal. The main thing that we gave them, though, was beyond safety and love,
and our own kids too. We give them this very much so.
Absolutely. A lot of these kids in these situations really needed structure and routine and predictability. That's so much up and down and turmoil and unpredictability and chaos that the best thing we could do is regular bedtimes, regular brushing teeth, regular everything, and lots of warning. If we're going to leave the house, we're going to tell them beforehand, and just give them as much predictability as they could. And that helped so much with their transition into our home.
And I think finally, as a parent, we've dealt with several things that we are not experts in. And so have support systems, and don't be afraid to get help, right? Like, you don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to be someone who knows all the answers. There are people out there that are there to help parents. They're there to help us. And so get support groups, spend time as, have close friends that can help you out. But really, if there's an expert you need to reach out to, don't be afraid, and don't pretend and think you have to do everything on your own.
Absolutely. That's our journey so far. And we just beg God to bless all of you on your journey. Ashley, back to you.
Thank you so much, Tara and Dan. That was an incredible testimony, and you both have a heart of gold. So thank you so much for sharing that information and your beautiful testimony and your advice. I really do appreciate it. I was like grabbing all of these tissues because your story is just very heartwarming and moving. And I do have a question. So you had to navigate some really tough situations and conversations. So how did you approach delivering the devastating news to your children? How did you approach those conversations? And what gave you the most encouragement during those moments?
Oh, that's a great question, and I'm going to take it. So we begin almost every conversation we can with prayer. We always call upon the Holy Spirit to be with us in all conversations. And we pray together we didn't even talk about this. We pray together on a daily basis, as an entire unit, as an entire family, and we all pray separately as well. And so that is what gives us the grace to be able to accept the things that we've been thrown, right? God is with us. And even though I truly believe that us not having Edwin in our home is not God's will, God wanted him here. he is still going to make something beautiful out of the choice that was made by China, right? Something beautiful is going to come from this. We may not know it, but I believe and have hope in the fact that our God is a good and loving God, and he will make good things come from it.
Oh, absolutely.
As we talk to our kids to kind of answer that, it comes down to knowing your kids. Now, in our house, we have a very open group dynamic. And so what worked best for us was to pull all of our kids together and in a very direct and simple way, this is what's happening. This is what we see. This is what we believe. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. And then let it process.
Yep.
You know, some of our kids will process they need to just be by themselves. Some are going to want to cry right then, right there, and just get mad about the situation. And as parents, knowing kind of how they're going to respond and letting them respond in a healthy way, and then following up with them and making sure that we're drawing that out. How are you doing? What's going on inside of you on this, and continuing to navigate.
And to be honest, we saw, I mean, thankfully, the one who really struggles a lot with emotions and things like that, she was already seeing a counselor, and so that was super helpful. We were not afraid to get any of them a counselor if they needed it, right? So like, this is something that we didn't know how to handle, and that was and we have lots of good priest friends too that have spent a lot of time counseling and directing as well. So
yeah, not thinking it would be a mistake for us to think we could just handle this and help our kids navigate,
because we didn't know how to handle it.
Right. No, and that's so important. And thank you both so much for sharing your stories. I know it's going to touch so many of our audience, and I really, really appreciate it. How old are all of your kids now? I was trying to do the mental math, but I was like following the years.
Yep. So Lucy's 18. Eva will be 16 in a month, and Leo is, well, he just turned 14. Whew. Just turned 14, and George and Edwin are both 11.
Amazing. How are teenage years for you? Is it better or worse?
Bigger kids, bigger problems, right? So our 14-year-old just got his permit, so he was our last one to get the permit. Eva gets her license tomorrow. And so, my Lord, you know, and just, you know, bigger emotions, right? Bigger kids, bigger problems. And so
my mom used to say something that's probably good to share in this context. Kids are just on loan. You know, at some point they become, yes, bigger kids, bigger problems, but at the same time, they're not ours. Right? They're not ours to keep. So it's hard to let a kid go off and leave.
We don't know that yet. We haven't done it. It's coming in about a month and a half where we let her go.
It's a necessary work.
Well, I'm sure you will approach that next chapter with love and care like you have their entire childhood. And so I really thank you again for sharing your story and for doing this with me. And thank you all for joining and streaming in to watch Tara and Dan's incredible story. But again, thank you all so much for being here, and we will see you next time.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks.